The relationship between science and religion has been a long-standing debate, with scientists often being perceived as trying to convince Christians that God is not real. This notion is rooted in the misconception that science and religion are mutually exclusive, and that scientists are inherently opposed to the idea of a higher power. However, the reality is that scientists are driven by a pursuit of knowledge and understanding, and the goal is not to disprove the existence of God, but rather to understand the natural world through empirical evidence and observation. One of the primary reasons scientists may appear to be at odds with Christianity is the concept of evolution. The theory of evolution, which is widely accepted by the scientific community, suggests that all living organisms have evolved over time through a process of natural selection. This idea is often seen as being in conflict with the biblical account of creation, which describes God as creating the world and all living things in 6 days. However, many scientists would argue that evolution and Christianity are not necessarily mutually exclusive, and that it is possible to believe in both the scientific theory of evolution and the existence of a higher power. Another reason scientists may be perceived as trying to convince Christians that God is not real is the concept of empiricism. Scientists rely on empirical evidence and observation to form conclusions about the natural world, and this approach can sometimes lead to a focus on the material and tangible aspects of reality. This can create a perception that scientists are dismissive of the spiritual or supernatural aspects of human experience, and that they are therefore opposed to the idea of God. However, many scientists would argue that the focus on empirical evidence is not a rejection of the spiritual, but rather a desire to understand the world in a way that is testable and falsifiable. It is also worth noting that the scientific community is not uniformly atheistic, and that many scientists are themselves Christians or adhere to other faith traditions. These scientists often see no conflict between their faith and their scientific pursuits, and may even argue that their faith is strengthened by their understanding of the natural world. For example, the concept of the fine-tuning of the universe, which suggests that the fundamental constants of the universe are precisely calibrated to allow for the existence of life, is often seen as evidence of a higher power by scientists of faith. In addition, some scientists may be motivated by a desire to promote critical thinking and skepticism, which can sometimes be misinterpreted as an attempt to undermine religious belief. The scientific method relies on a process of hypothesis formation, testing, and revision, and this approach can sometimes be seen as being in conflict with the more dogmatic aspects of religious faith. However, many scientists would argue that critical thinking and skepticism are essential components of the scientific process, and that they are not necessarily opposed to religious belief. Ultimately, the notion that scientists are trying to convince Christians that God is not real is a misunderstanding of the scientific enterprise. Scientists are driven by a pursuit of knowledge and understanding, and their goal is to understand the natural world through empirical evidence and observation. While there may be some scientists who are openly atheistic or anti-theistic, this is not representative of the scientific community as a whole. By promoting a greater understanding of the scientific method in the natural world, scientists can help to foster a more nuanced and informed discussion about the relationship between science and faith, and can work to build bridges between these two often separate spheres of human experience. By doing so, scientists can help to create a more inclusive and respectful dialogue, one that values both the pursuit of knowledge and the importance of faith and spirituality in human life.